Chapter 631. Olivia's first reaction wasn't anger. She just felt like there were a lot of weird people around Ethan. What was the deal with this woman that looked like her? Ethan was visibly angered. The veins popped on his forehead. He stopped Diego. Diego worked up a sweat from kicking Kayla, but his expression was still humble when he talked to Ethan. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. I had people look into her chat logs and phone records. There wasn't anything suspicious, but I did find the original copy of the video." Ethan walked next to Kayla, who was panting on the floor, and said, "Tell me, what did you talk about with Daryl?" "Nothing, really. Meeting you was the biggest mistake in my life," Kayla said with a sneer. Ethan was at a loss for words. It was the first time he felt like a woman in love could be so terrifying. He thought the woman would at least tell the truth since he had helped her in the past. He didn't expect her to be so thankless. Even in her current situation, she bore resentment for him. Diego was frustrated to see that Kayla was still looking at Ethan intently. Ethan saw that she wasn't planning on letting up. He didn't want to waste any more of his time, so he got a copy of the video and left with Olivia. He speculated that even if that person was involved in this matter, it should have been an impromptu contact with Kayla. There probably wasn't a deeper connection between the two of them. Ethan came over because he didn't want to miss out on any leads, but it seemed like she was just a disposable pawn. Nothing useful would come out of interrogating her. Ethan didn't even spare her another look. He reached out to Olivia and said, "Liv, let's go." Olivia looked at him, and then she looked at Kayla, who was gritting her teeth while lying on the floor. She looked like she was about to lose her mind. Ultimately, she decided not to ask anything and said, "Okay." Then, she reached out and held Ethan's hand. He liked holding her hand, be it when they were in public or in private. Olivia also felt safe when he was holding her hand. Kayla lost it when she saw them holding hands. She shrieked like a crazed beast, "Ethan Miller, I hate you. Why make me hopeful if you never loved me? Why did you bring me out from the mountains?" Ethan didn't even feel like wasting another minute on someone like Kayla. He stopped in his tracks. Kayla stopped yelling. She thought Ethan would turn around and look at her, but that didn't happen. Instead, Ethan grabbed some tissues from the table. Everyone else stared at him. No one knew why he did that. Ethan suddenly crouched and used the tissues to wipe off the blood that landed on Olivia's shoes. He was focused and careful when he did it. Diego and the others were stunned. They had only known Ethan to be cold and heartless. None of them had seen Ethan treat anyone so tenderly. Kayla was so shocked that she lost her voice momentarily. She froze up as she stared at Ethan. He was completely different from how she remembered him. He was never so gentle, nor would he ever polish a woman's shoe so humbly. Why couldn't she be the woman he treated like that? Kayla frantically crawled toward Ethan. "Why can't it be me? I love you so much. Why can't you even look at me?" This time, Olivia stepped in front of Ethan and blocked Kayla's view. "Enough." Kayla turned her aggression toward Olivia. "Why are you so smug? Do you see my face? Before you showed up, I acted as your substitute. Then, I was abandoned. Take a good look because this will happen to you in the future." Even though Olivia didn't remember anything, she could still tell how ridiculous Kayla's statement was. "Miss Harper, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. I'm not trying to show off or anything. I just wanted to tell you that you should put yourself first before falling in love with someone." After saying that, Olivia turned around, held Ethan's hand, and left with him. Kayla's screams can be heard coming from behind. Chapter 632. Olivia wasn't bothered by Kayla's words at all. She was still calm and confident, which was in stark contrast to Kayla, who was still on the ground. The instant the door closed, Kayla felt she understood why Ethan fell for Olivia, but it was too late. The door cut off her blood-curdling screams. She didn't have a future anymore. She had destroyed her own marriage with her own doing. The man who loved her once no longer did. Ethan was still holding Olivia's hand when they got into the car. Everything he was worried about since Olivia regained consciousness didn't happen. But her personality was completely different. She was calm and composed. She no longer felt jealous when other women approached him. The good thing was she didn't reject him either. Overall, she was very emotionally stable. Sometimes, she was so calm that it scared Ethan. "Liv, do you have any questions for me?" Sitting in the dark, Ethan was the one who started the conversation. Olivia spoke in a seemingly calm voice. "You can tell me if you want. You and her, it's not what you think. I mentioned that I met you 11 years ago. I found her in a mountain village the next year. She was being forced to be married off for money by her parents. She wasn't even of legal age yet. Her face reminded me of you, so I helped her out. So that's what happened. I think I can guess what happened next. She treated you like her savior and fell for you. Then, you distanced yourself from her when you found out about how she felt. She went crazy because she couldn't accept that, right?" Ethan rubbed his temples and said, "Yeah, she was rather extreme. She did some things to force my hand and ended up the way she was. Now, she has also hurt the man that loves her." Olivia could picture the bloodshot eyes on Diego's elegant face when she closed her eyes. Both Diego and Kayla fell in love with people who didn't want them, and they were driven mad by their love. Olivia thought it was a very pitiful situation to be in. "Did you bring me here today so I could meet her?" Ethan thought about the time he met with Kayla in private, and she hugged him from behind. He wasn't sure if she arranged for people to take pictures of that. Ethan held Olivia's hand tightly and said, "Liv, I love you. I don't want anyone to come between us, and I don't want the existence of an insignificant woman to sow seeds of dissonance in our relationship." Olivia could feel Ethan's concern and anxiety. She nestled her head on his chest gently. "Yeah, I know." When Olivia opened her eyes, she could see the boundless love that Ethan had for her in his eyes. He was hopelessly in love with her. He acted like he was afraid of scaring her away every day. Olivia felt lost. She had a feeling that something big might have happened between her and Ethan. Whatever happened could be hurtful, and Ethan didn't want her to relive the trauma. Since it was a traumatic memory, Olivia didn't want to look into it deliberately. Even though she had a hollow feeling sometimes, like there was something important that she needed to do, she would suppress those emotions. She just wanted to enjoy a peaceful life. Olivia's stomach began to hurt, so she gently massaged it. Calvin was released from police custody after they acquired the evidence. The Miller Group's PR department finally went to work. They would drown in criticism if they continued to stay silent. Other than the PR department, legal department, and marketing department, everyone else in the company was also burning the midnight oil. Ethan was getting ready for the final stages of his plan. They have organized all the information. Mara Hudson's past, her death at the hands of the janitor, her manager setting her rivals up for the sake of gaining publicity, and someone splashing sulfuric acid on Olivia when she went to the mall. The company posted everything onto the internet in great detail. Suddenly, everyone who had been criticizing the Miller Group on the internet was dumbfounded. Why did the tides change? Chapter 633. The plot twist came so abruptly that no one saw it coming. Mara was a ruthless bully and did a lot of immoral things. A lot of the people that she bullied came forward and exposed her. Some of the victims of her bullying were even diagnosed with depression and were affected for life. There was even a middle-aged couple that had a child that committed suicide due to false accusations by Mara. They stood before the cameras and condemned Mara with a yellowed picture. Then, there were Mara's teachers, classmates, and neighbors. Everyone came forward and shared their experiences with her. Makeup artists, stylists, and other lower-level workers in the entertainment industry also spoke up anonymously about Mara's arrogant and domineering behavior. The most surprising thing was that several other cleaners and servers also mentioned that Mara had scammed them in the same way. The altercation between Mara and Olivia had become public knowledge. Even the original evening gown in Olivia's home had been shown to the public. The person who splashed the sulfuric acid cried and repented before the camera. He claimed that he had been paid to do it. Anyone with a brain could tell who was in the wrong. On the other hand, people tried to splash acid on Olivia. Then, someone tried to assassinate her. As for the Miller Group, other companies committed corporate espionage and caused the company to incur massive losses. The Miller Group had already dealt with the people who tried to take advantage of the situation. Everyone received their rightful punishment, be it fines or imprisonment. Some were sued, and others were made to release public apologies. The tide had changed completely. Everyone that insulted Olivia started to feel bad for her. They also started to feel bad for what they had said. Many of them claimed that they would be spending money at the Miller Group's stores. The change in public opinion would make the Miller Group's profit increase several times. But Ethan didn't really care about that. It was already the middle of the night. Olivia was sound asleep while Ethan was smoking on the balcony. He puffed out the smoke with a gloomy expression. The gentleness and warmth he showed Olivia was gone. Brent and Kelvin had returned to his side safely. Ethan didn't turn on the lights. There were only the faint lights in the yard that illuminated their tall, muscular figures. Mr. Miller, Daryl left the country in the afternoon. Ethan grunted and said, "That little bastard sure is good at running away." Both Kelvin and Brent knew the grudges between Ethan and Daryl. As soon as Kelvin was released from custody, he caught up on the latest gossip from Cyril. He was frustrated that he was away during such a crucial time. "Mr. Miller, are you just letting him off just like that? He has been plotting against you over the years. And he even tried to stab you in the back when the Miller Group was in trouble." Brent cleared his throat lightly and ended the topic. It was not a secret that Ethan wouldn't need to exert much effort if he wanted to deal with someone. The only reason he had been turning a blind eye to Daryl's antics was because they shared the same blood. Anyone else would be disgusted to share the same blood as the son of a mistress. Although Ethan looked indifferent on the surface, only those who knew his past would know how much he craved to be loved. The only reason Daryl was still roaming free was because Ethan saw him as family. "I hope he has learned his lesson this time. Or else, Mr. Miller might not let him off the hook so easily next time. But, we were able to root out the traitors in Miller Group thanks to him." That was a little bit of a blessing in disguise. Ethan snuffed out his cigarette with a displeased expression. "The situation escalated so much, but we didn't even pick up a single lead on whoever did this. Don't worry, Mr. Miller. They will eventually reveal themselves." Ethan wouldn't be able to rest easy as long as the culprit wasn't dealt with. "What about the person that splashed the acid? He is no longer useful to us." Ethan turned and left. "I'll deal with him personally." Chapter 634. A tall man was curled up in a corner of a cold, dark room. Shane could hear a click. He was like a rat in the dark and was silently paying attention to what was happening outside. The tiniest sound would attract his attention. He adjusted his glasses and stumbled toward the door. A ray of light shone in through, and Shane became hopeful. Ethan's men didn't do anything to him after he made the video clearing up the misunderstanding about Olivia. But he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for over half a day. His throat was parched. The door was finally being opened. Was he going to be freed? A tall and well-built man appeared at the door. Shane anxiously asked, "I did what you asked. You should let me go now." Someone turned on the lights in the room. The bright light shone right into Shane's eyes, so he covered his eyes with his hands. After his eyes adjusted to the light, he heard an indifferent voice say, "You think you'd be leaving?" The voice wasn't loud, but Shane felt like he had been hit by a bus. He had a feeling that he might not be able to leave this place in one piece. He saw a handsome man in a suit before him. He had only seen the man on television before. Mr. Miller. Maybe it was because Ethan had such a commanding presence, or maybe it was because he had learned his lesson. Shane knelt on the floor without hesitation. "I was fooled by the rumors online, Mr. Miller. Trust me, I wasn't really planning on hurting your wife." "You weren't planning on hurting her." Ethan thought that was the funniest joke he heard in a long time. Ethan wasn't someone who would bully the weak, nor would he look down on others. He would have forgiven Shane if it was just a minor issue and Olivia wasn't hurt. He reviewed the footage repeatedly. If Olivia reacted a little slower, she would have been doused in sulfuric acid, especially her face. The majority of it would be eroded. The consequences of Shane's actions would be devastating, but he glossed over it by saying he didn't plan on doing it. Ethan smiled without saying a word. Shane's heart started to beat quickly, and his back was covered in sweat. Just as Shane was trying to guess what Ethan would do, Ethan suddenly slashed Shane's arm with a knife. Ethan's actions were so swift that Shane could already feel the pain when he realized what had happened. He screamed in pain. "I didn't mean to do it. Can you forgive me?" Ethan asked with an icy expression. Although Shane was in pain, he didn't care about it as long as he could get out of there alive. He quickly said, "Of course I can forgive you. I deserve that. You are quick-witted." Then, Shane was excited. In response, Ethan cut Shane a few more times ruthlessly. He didn't even blink as he swung the knife repeatedly. Shane finally realized that Ethan's question was meaningless. No matter what his reply was, Ethan had no intention of letting him go. "Does it hurt?" "A lot. Mr. Miller, please don't hurt me anymore. You want me to stop hurting you. Did you think about that when you tried to hurt Olivia?" Ethan grabbed him by the collar and said, "Do you know what happens when a person is doused in sulfuric acid?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, and his expression was stormy. Shane was sweating profusely from the fear. He muttered, "I don't know. I really don't. Mr. Miller, I don't know what came over me. I was blinded by greed. I didn't think too much about it," Ethan said coldly. "Then, I'll give you a taste of what happens when you're doused in sulfuric acid." Chapter 635. Shane felt a chill when he heard Ethan's words. He looked at Ethan in disbelief. "Mr. Miller, what did you say?" Kelvin brought over a huge bucket carefully. He didn't hurt himself while doing so because he wore specialized gloves in advance. "I'm a fair man. I'll splash you with some sulfuric acid. If you can dodge it, good for you. But if you get doused in acid, don't blame me for it." Fear flashed in Shane's eyes. He had already been cut by Ethan. It would be bad if the acid touched his wounds. Shane knelt on the floor and begged for mercy, groveling with all his might. "Mr. Miller, I was wrong. I realize that now. I'll die if you splash that acid on me." Ethan kicked him away and straightened up. He looked at Shane emotionlessly and said slowly, "So you do know that sulfuric acid can be lethal. Yet you splashed it at a woman without hesitation. You know how important a woman's face is to her, right? If it's ruined, how would she live even if the acid didn't kill her?" Shane raised his hands and started to slap himself. "Yes, I was a fool. I only cared about myself and didn't spare others so much as a thought. It's all my fault. Then you should bear the punishment for your mistake." Ethan looked at Kelvin and said, "Do it." Ethan had already looked into Shane's background. He's a compulsive gambler who was down on his luck. He was also Mara's fan. After the incident with Olivia and Mara happened, Shane criticized Olivia online. Someone contacted him and gave him some money to splash sulfuric acid on Olivia. Shane had been driven to his wits' end by his debt collectors. He thought it was a good thing to be able to avenge his idol and get paid at the same time. He agreed to do it without hesitation. But he didn't expect to land himself into so much trouble. Ethan walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. After a while, blood-curdling screams could be heard coming from the room. Ethan was wiping the blood stains from his knife with a towel as Brent stood behind him and reported. "We've looked at everything. They dealt in cash, and the person was very careful. They made the transaction in a palace where there weren't any surveillance cameras." According to Shane, the person is a man. He covered himself up thoroughly and didn't reveal any defining features. His height and build resemble mine, and he didn't sound like he was from Aldenvine. "Is that all you got?" "Yes." Even his voice had been altered. He was careful not to leave any clues. "All we can guess is that the person who wants Mrs. Miller dead is not in the country, but he is a man of means." Ethan toyed with his knife and said with a cold expression, "What a pity. I thought we would be able to root him out with how the situation had escalated." "Don't let your guard down. Ask around on the street where the transaction happened. There might be other witnesses. Don't worry, Mr. Miller, I have people on that. Be sure to keep our trip abroad under wraps. Don't raise anyone's suspicions." "Understood." Ethan patted Brent on the shoulder and said, "You've been through a lot this time round. You're too kind, Mr. Miller. They didn't have any evidence, and they couldn't beat the information out of us. We only had to record a statement. But Xavier Harper seems to blame you for what happened to his sister. He might be trouble. Do I need to come up with a reason to get him transferred? There's no need. I won't be staying for long, and we don't really cross paths often. Be sure to tie up loose ends. Understood. Ethan walked into the darkness. They still didn't know who was plotting against them. Who was trying to harm Olivia? Chapter 636. The Miller Group made an amazing comeback. The stock prices went through the roof overnight. The company's business was booming. The franchise supermarkets had customers lining up outside the doors before opening hour. It was the same for their jewelry shops, clothing shops, and even real estate agencies. Their live streams had tens of thousands of viewers demanding that they line up the products to be bought, especially the people who criticized the Miller Group and Olivia mercilessly online. Olivia's face was almost destroyed, and the Miller Group was on the verge of bankruptcy. So, they went to the Miller Group's shops and spent their money. Ethan had never lacked money in his life. Everyone knew that the Millers were wealthy, but no one knew exactly how wealthy they were. Only Ethan knew that the wealth accumulated by the previous generations was worth more than 100 Miller Groups. The Miller family's assets spanned various industries and countries. Some assets were public information, and there were also some well-hidden ones. Only the head of the Miller family knew everything about the family's assets. So, Ethan didn't really care even though the Miller Group lost several $100 million. Nor did he care about the malls being damaged by people. He didn't care about the losses then, and he didn't care about the profits that were being generated. Ethan gave it a quick glance and set his phone aside. He turned to the side and gazed at Olivia. All of the riches in the world were nothing to him compared to her. Perhaps his gaze was too intense, and Olivia began to wake from her slumber. The moment she opened her eyes, she was met with Ethan's loving and tender gaze. "Good morning, Liv." Ethan found her bewildered look adorable, so he leaned in and kissed her on the lips. Olivia reflexively wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeper. She felt a sense of tenderness for Ethan hearing about his past. Although Jeff wasn't her biological father, she could tell that Jeff loved her a lot and gave her a happy childhood based on what Ethan told her. Ethan didn't have a dad or a mother's love. To him, she was his only family. So, she didn't push him away and accepted the kiss. Ethan broke off before he lost control. It had been several months since the premature birth, and Olivia was in good enough health for intercourse. But Ethan didn't want to take advantage of her. He could feel that she had some affection for him, but she wasn't really in love. Ethan wasn't in a rush. He had plenty of time to let her fall in love with him. "Liv, I might be a little busy in the next couple of days. There are a lot of things I need to take care of personally. We'll travel abroad after I'm done with that, okay?" Olivia nodded and said, "I'm okay with that. The people coming after you haven't been identified yet. I've arranged a secure place for you to study medicine for your safety." Olivia subconsciously looked at her hand wrapped in bandages and said, "Okay." She figured that Ethan wouldn't do anything to hurt her. Ethan got up and went to the bathroom. Olivia stretched and caught up with the news on her phone. Everyone was talking about the Miller Group. It was like the weather outside at the moment. The storm had cleared. The good weather was a long time coming. The sun was shining brightly, and the snow had melted. Olivia's mood improved with the weather. Ethan hugged her from behind, smelling like peppermint. He said, "What's on your mind?" "I'm thinking about my future." Ethan's body was still slightly wet, and several droplets of water dripped onto Olivia's neck. Ethan leaned toward her ear and asked, "Am I in your future?" Chapter 637. Olivia fell silent. She felt lost about her future. She felt like she was a priest who had attained enlightenment and had lost her desires, love, and even hatred. She agreed when Ethan asked her to study medicine, but she didn't feel strongly about it. She didn't really care if she studied medicine or business. Anything was fine. The lack of a response didn't anger Ethan. He nibbled on her ear and said seriously, "Liv, I'm not the same. In my eyes, you're my past and my future." After he got dressed, Ethan kissed Olivia on the forehead and left. Olivia watched him leave with Snowball in her hands. She was expressionless, and her heart was calm. She didn't reject Ethan, but she didn't love him either. She counted the days until they would be leaving Aldenvine. There was nothing else for her there. In the following days, Ethan went out at the break of dawn but would always come home in time for dinner with Olivia. He would also watch some movies with her after dinner. The flowers on the table were changed every day, and his ring never came off his finger. His eyes were filled with his love for her. The day before their departure, Ethan hugged Olivia and asked, "Liv, is there anything else you want to do in Aldenvine? We won't be coming back in a long time after we leave." Olivia answered without hesitance, "Not really." There wasn't even a hint of reluctance in her voice. Although that was what Ethan had wanted, he felt a little uneasy. He didn't know why he felt that way, but he quickly dismissed the feeling. He reassured himself that everything would be better. Ethan figured that Olivia would grow accustomed to her current life after a couple of years. And when the danger had passed, they could be reunited with their kids, too. It started snowing again on the day they were leaving. Madame Burgess wiped her tears away as she said her goodbyes. Olivia handed Madame Burgess a check that she had prepared in advance and said, "Take care, Madame Burgess. You take care of yourself, too, Mrs. Miller." Madame Burgess placed the check in her pocket and held Olivia's hands. "I hope you and Mr. Miller will be happy together." "Thanks." The car started moving. Olivia gazed at the slowly shrinking villa through the rearview mirror. She heard it was the house she lived in with Ethan when they were newly wedded. Surprisingly, she didn't feel a shred of sadness as she left the place behind. Madame Burgess, dressed in a thick down jacket, stood at the intersection and waved goodbye. After a while, she was covered with snow. Olivia wondered if her family would be waving her goodbye like that if they were still alive. In the VIP waiting lounge of the airport, Olivia put on her headphones and read a magazine while eating. Olivia noticed that her stomach pains became more frequent. So, she stopped eating overly spicy foods and tried to keep herself well fed. She woke up too early in the morning and didn't have time to eat breakfast. So, her stomach was throbbing in pain. "What's wrong?" Ethan noticed the flash of pain that appeared on her face. "I didn't get to eat breakfast, so my stomach is hurting a little." Ethan recalled that Olivia did mention that she had some gastric issues last year. "Does it hurt a lot?" They were about to board the plane, so Olivia didn't want to inconvenience Ethan. So, she shook her head. "Not really, it's just a minor discomfort. I'll feel better after eating." Ethan handed Olivia a glass of water and said, "Drink some water. You'll feel better." "Okay." As they were lining up to board the plane, a woman yelled from behind, "Are you really abandoning me, Ethan?" Olivia tried to look back, but Ethan stopped her. "I think someone's calling your name." "No, you must have misheard." There seemed to be a woman in the wheelchair who was crying and trying to get to Ethan, but someone stopped her. "Is she calling out for you?" Ethan replied emotionlessly, "No, let's go." Chapter 638. The plane landed safely at its destination after over 10 hours of flying. Olivia took off her sleeping mask and stretched her stiff limbs. Zealandia was halfway across the globe from Aldenvine, and its weather was the complete opposite. It was snowing heavily in Aldenvine, but it was warm in Grovale, the capital city of Zealandia. The ocean breeze brought in fresh air with it. Olivia felt refreshed as soon as she disembarked from the plane. At the entrance to the VIP channel, Brian, dressed in a black uniform, was already there to pick up Ethan and Olivia. "Welcome to Grovale, Mr. Miller." Brian's gaze turned to Olivia, and he sized her up. Then, he said slowly, "Welcome to Grovale, Miss Fordham." Olivia picked up on Brian's scrutiny. Her intuition told her that the man didn't like her much. But Olivia had nothing to prove to him. She nodded at him and walked off. Ethan looked at Brian disdainfully and said, "Something wrong with your eyes?" "I don't mind poking them out for you." Brian's skin crawled, and he quickly lowered his head. Kelvin looked at Brian with an amused expression and said, "Mr. Copley, my brother briefed you before we arrived. Why are you feigning ignorance?" "Miss Fordham, you got to be kidding me. Let's go." Brent tapped Kelvin on the shoulder as he walked by. He didn't want Kelvin to cause needless trouble. Brent didn't even look at Brian when he walked past him. Brian worked for Mrs. Miller Sr. He reacted the way he did because she didn't like Olivia. Ethan quickly caught up to Olivia and held her hand. He explained softly, I kept our marriage under wraps before. He didn't know who you were. Now he knows. Olivia had an idea of what was happening but didn't say anything. It would seem like her mother-in-law didn't like her that much. Ethan turned his head to observe Olivia's expression. Olivia went to a restaurant in the airport and started to order food. She didn't seem fazed by Brian at all. Olivia was already used to her surroundings. Her emotions were incredibly stable. She was different from before. No one could impact her mood. I looked up guides before. I had wanted to try the local cuisines in Grovale for some time. Ethan said lovingly, the food in the airport isn't that authentic. Rest and recover from the jet lag. I'll bring you to eat more food when you're rested. Okay, Olivia responded quickly. Brian followed them into the restaurant. Ethan had just reprimanded him, so he felt a little fearful. He mustered his courage and walked next to Ethan and Olivia. He kept his head lowered and said carefully, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Miller Sr. is still waiting to dine with you at home. Olivia could guess from Brian's attitude how Ethan's mother felt about her. If the mother-in-law didn't like her that much, she probably wouldn't get much chance to eat her fill at dinner. Olivia saw the time was getting late, so she didn't want to risk going hungry. Her stomach was delicate. It would hurt if she ate too much, too little, or didn't eat. So, it was important that she got to eat. Olivia didn't care who she used to be. She just wanted to treat herself better. Before she could answer, Ethan said, I just need to take a quick bite. It won't take long. Ethan took the blame upon himself. Brian couldn't say anything more, so he took his leave. Olivia didn't beat around the bush. Her goal was to eat her fill. She ate until she burped with satisfaction. Then, she wiped her mouth and stood up. Ethan said with a smile, you ate so much. Are you even going to eat dinner at home? Olivia winked and said, I have a feeling that trouble is waiting for us at home. She leaned toward Ethan's ear and said, does your mother not like me? Chapter 639. Olivia had asked the same question a while back when she had just woken up. Back then, Olivia was a lost lamb, and she talked in a soft-spoken tone. Olivia had changed since. She was radiating confidence. She pursed her lips and added, I don't mind if she doesn't like me. It's not like I'm going to marry her. Then, she walked out of the restaurant briskly. Ethan watched as Olivia left and fell into contemplation. Olivia could be so carefree when she wasn't bound by her children and family. Olivia had a spring in her step. It might be because she slept well on the plane or because she was in a good mood after arriving at a new location. Olivia was skipping like a child. Gone was the depressed demeanor that she had for the past year. When they walked past the shops that sold local snacks, Olivia would ask Ethan to buy her some of the snacks. The time was getting late, but Brian didn't dare to speak up. He didn't know what Olivia was trying to pull. Olivia thought she had suppressed herself for too long. So she became very excited and happy after coming to a new environment. As Ethan was buying some snacks for her, she went into another ship. She bought a bunch of souvenirs and walked into someone as she was coming out of the shop. Her souvenirs fell all over the floor. A gentle voice said, I'm sorry. She thought it sounded familiar. It's fine, Olivia replied as she picked her stuff back up. Then, the two of them reached for the same box of snacks, and their eyes met. Keith's face lit up when he saw Olivia. I didn't expect to see you here, Olivia. Has your illness been cured? Olivia was confused. Illness. What illness did she have? Before Olivia could inquire further, a woman came over and grabbed Keith's arm. She said, get a move on, Dr. Rogers. The show's about to start. Why are you still dragging your feet here? Keith said apologetically, I'm sorry, but I need to go. We'll catch up next time. I'm relieved to see that you've recovered so well. Goodbye, Olivia. The woman pulled Keith away in a hurry. Olivia was confused as she wondered who the man was. Ethan tapped her shoulder and said, why are you spacing out? I just met a man. He seemed to know me. A woman called him Dr. Rogers. He said I had recovered from an illness. Was I sick before? Ethan recalled the winter of last year. Olivia was away from home for 1 whole week. He heard that she caught a cold and was hospitalized. Ethan figured that Keith was probably talking about that. Yeah, he was a senior in your school. He used to care for Dad when he was hospitalized. Then, he went to study abroad. Olivia was puzzled. He said I was sick. It was a cold. There was a period when you were in bad health and were hospitalized. So that's what it was. Olivia felt like something was wrong. Keith's tone seemed to imply that she had a severe illness. She saw that Ethan's expression was calm. Olivia shook her head and thought that she must be overthinking. Let's go. We shouldn't keep your mother waiting for too long. Ethan tapped her on the nose and said, she's your mother, too. We don't know if she even acknowledges me as her daughter-in-law yet. Of course, she'd acknowledge you. You're so awesome. Ethan wrapped his hand around Olivia, and they left the airport. Keith looked back uneasily and saw that. He was puzzled. He thought the relationship between Olivia and Ethan was already irreparable. But they looked like they were lovers in heat. It was not long ago that Ethan was all over the news. Keith thought he misunderstood something. Ethan had been secretly married for years. Then, he suddenly held a public ceremony. It was weird, no matter how he looked at it. The thing he was most worried about was Olivia's condition. The report showed that Olivia's cancer was already in stage 3. If it develops to stage 4, Olivia would only have around 6 more months to live. Olivia had been alive for a year, so the cancer cells had probably stopped spreading. Her complexion looked pretty good, too. Her condition was perhaps under control. But cancer is tricky. It could always come back within 5 years. If she could survive 5 years, her chances of recovery would increase significantly. If the cancer relapsed and spread within 5 years, no one would be able to save her. She's long gone, and you're still staring. Was she a woman you secretly admired for years? Keith withdrew his gaze and smiled lovingly at the woman beside her. Are you jealous? It's all in the past now. You're the only one I love now. Let's go. Chapter 640. The Miller residence was located in the suburban area of Grovale. It was a lovely place with mountains and rivers around. Lush vegetation covered every corner along the way to the residence. The city's lights were unique. Some resembled star-shaped light strings cascading from tall plants. There were also lights shaped like mushrooms, pumpkins, various small animals, and fairy lanterns. It was like Ethan and his company had wandered into a fantasy world rather than a typical city. By the time they arrived at the Miller residence, it was already 8 p.m. The Miller residence was enormous. A garden surrounded it. It was hard to see in the dark, but one could discern the silhouettes of the pruned rose bushes at the roadside. There was a rich scent of flowers in the air. Birds flew away frantically as the car drove by. The villa possessed the unique style of this city. It was brightly lit from all sides. Olivia looked at it from afar. It was countless times bigger than the villa they lived in. Looking from the front, it looked like it was the pearly gates of heaven. It looked like a holy and sacred place. Olivia followed Ethan into the living room while stepping on the soft, long pile carpet. Everywhere she looked, the decor was grand and magnificent. Olivia felt like she was in a palace. There were valuable paintings and antiques wherever she looked. The whole place was simply glorious. Luckily, Olivia wasn't from a regular family either. So, she didn't react too strongly to her surroundings. Instead, she felt a little uneasy. The place didn't feel like a home. It was more like a museum or palace. It didn't feel like a place where people lived. Ethan's expression was solemn. Olivia felt like he wasn't returning home but visiting a grave, or it was like he was at a formal event. Even Olivia started to feel tense. Olivia hadn't asked about Ethan's mother much on the way here. His 3-year-old birthday party probably left a deep impression. They were about to meet. What face would he make? Olivia looked at Ethan with curiosity. He was pursing his lips, and he had a piercing demeanor. An emotionless female voice came from above. You're here. The voice was calm and indifferent, like a chilly beam coming from the sky. Olivia raised her head instinctively and saw a woman in a white dress standing on the second floor of the spiral staircase. Olivia gasped. She had guessed that the mother of a handsome man like Ethan would be gorgeous. Thinking back to her past, Olivia thought Ethan's mother would be a wild but beautiful woman. But the woman before her wasn't at all wild. She was like a queen. Elegant and majestic like the moon, someone you could only admire from afar but never dare to approach. Her exquisite features made her look like she hadn't aged a day. Her white dress, pale skin, and the blue bracelet on her wrist made her look stunning. No matter how Olivia looked, Ethan's mother, Janice Proctor, was a calm and beautiful woman. She didn't look like she would lose her mind for love. What was Kenneth Miller thinking, leaving such a beautiful woman like her? Even Olivia felt attracted to Janice when she laid her eyes on her. Olivia thought Janice would be more excited to see the son she hadn't seen in a long time. Instead, she was calm. Ethan replied calmly, "Yeah. Like mother, like son." Ethan grabbed Olivia's hand and introduced her. "Mom, this is your daughter-in-law, Olivia Fordham."